Hello, this is Shilpa here. Welcome to this video. Now this case is all about synthetic prescriptions. This was a male who came, he was 51 years of age, and he came to see me in August 2003. Now he had severe eczema on his fingers for about a year, and his skin was very rough, quite itchy, quite cracked, and there were burning pains he complained of. It was aggravated when he scratched, and there was bleeding when he scratched, and he did it in his sleep, so he didn't realize it. It was aggravated by any sort of warmth, and it was aggravated mostly at night. So he was scratching through the entire night. He had been prescribed steroids for that, but the eruptions just recurred every time he stopped the application, so he was quite frustrated. The other thing he had was this pain in both his hips. So he had osteoarthritis, and he was on daily doses of painkillers for that. And he mentioned the pain radiated to the knees, and he felt very weak in his legs. And there was also this general tiredness and lassitude, because also he couldn't sleep properly. His sleep was very poor, not just from the itching, but also from his personal and business worries. It kept him up until midnight, and so he seemed very reserved. He was really reluctant to talk about his personal issues. So what I did was I was basically treating him at stage 2, and I repertorized the case. It strongly repertorized. The top remedies were sulfur, arsenic, mesareum, mork. So I started off with sulfur and followed it with arsenic album. He seemed to respond to arsenic well, so I kept him on arsenic. But what happened was eventually the remedies helped him, but he could not go further. So finally, in one of the follow-ups, he seemed to talk about his upsetting moments. So that was somewhere I could get some deeper information for the first time. So what he said was, I get hurt very, very easily, especially when everyone around me is so selfish. And he said, these are exactly the thoughts which keep me awake at night. And then he mentioned that about 20 years back, his very close friends, they tricked him in a card game. So he was a gambler. And so he said they all came together, they got together, they swindled me, and it hurt me really deeply. And then he said he had a fever for about a week or 2 weeks. And then he said he has never been able to trust anyone in life. He said, I feel the same about my family. So he owns a plastic factory, and it's a family business. And he said they could just betray me anytime for my share of money. And he says, I'm cheated everywhere, in my business, with my friends, in my relationships. And he said, my business partner is like my own brother, and he can develop a lust for money. And so I have to be very careful. And I have sleepless nights thinking about this. I toss and turn in bed, and I just can't sleep until midnight. So that was like the first time he was talking about what was it about. And then I mentioned, how did you react to it? And he said, I wanted to take revenge. In a way, these people came together. These were my really close friends, but I never did it because I want to keep those relationships and friendships. They're very important to me, but I can never forgive and forget some things. And he said, I like romantic movies. I like songs which are a bit sad, especially movies showing love for one's parents. He said he's very, very attached. He likes this movie Sambandh, which means relationship. And he said it's a movie where there's love between parents and their son. It's shown with a lot of emotional songs, and he loves it. So he said, but that's movies, right? It's not real life. In real life, love is just artificial, and it's only for selfish reasons. It's all about money. And he said, I've seen this all my life. So that was it, actually. That was the case. Those were the 10 minutes of conversation, which gave me some information. But that was when I realized this was the most striking thing. he was very, very suspicious and he was not able to trust anyone in his life. But on the other hand, he had this really strong desire for relationships. And that was why I had the feeling he was not very trusting initially in giving me his case history. He might have said it because he wanted to get rid of his skin complaints. And he still remembers that incident when his friends tricked him in a card game, which was like 20 years back. So that was the crux of the case for me, that he could just not trust anyone and he could be cheated by the person for whom he has developed that sort of a close bond, be it friends, be it family, be it business partners. And so I tried to analyze this case. Now, remember, this case could be analyzed in any I use the homeopathy software, but obviously you can do it on paper, you can do it reading the books and also any other software program. But I wanted to go through the entire process of how you can do that so you can use it in your practice. So what I did was I used those really strong rubrics like deceit aggravates or suspiciousness or mistrustful with family, with friends, these money themes. So I wanted to collect as many things as I could about these themes and see what remedies come up. Now, it wasn't very surprising. If you see, you have Kaliars, sulflavum, and then you have other remedies like coriander, pulsatilla, nux, and so on. But what was important was, just from my understanding of the synthetic prescription point, arsenic theme was just running through the entire case. Now, I was very sure that whatever remedy I give him, it had to have an arsenic element in it. So what I did was, I tried to see, because there are so many smaller remedies which were arsenic compounds, somewhere in the entire repertorial analysis, I tried to put them together and I wanted to find out what are the arsenic compounds which come up for these themes. And that was what I got. Kali Ars, sulflavum, arsenic album, obviously because it's a polycrest. Natramars, which was interesting, and then we have the others coming up. So what I thought was, there were three important compounds which came up at the top, that was apart from the polycrest, of course. So I took Kali Ars, I took Ars sulflavum, and I took Natramars. And I thought I need to see and study these remedies in the provings, because they are proven remedies, but I don't know much about them. So I need to find out what is it about these remedies and whether that comes up very strongly for my case. And what I did was I wanted to differentiate them with respect to his main organ of affinity, which was his skin, and especially the fingers, because that was exactly where the eruptions were. They were nowhere else on his body. So I wanted the skin, especially the fingers, or in between the fingers. So that was all he had, which was affected, which was for me quite striking. And the other thing was this hip joints. Those were the only joints, and this pain which was radiating to the knees. These were the two very important components of my case, especially with the physical affinity. So I used Ars sulflavum, Kali Ars, and Natramars, and I'm differentiating them with respect to the finger eruption. And what I found was only Natramars was the remedy which had the affinity for the fingers and the eruptions within these three. The other two were not represented at all in the proving data. The other one was about the hip joints. And again, I was quite surprised. It was only Natramars which had this strong affinity for the hip joints, especially in the pain. And that for me was very interesting. Pain, rheumatic, hip joints, shooting to the knee, aggravated by moving about. And that was exactly what he complained of. So I was now very interested in Natramars. Before I would have done this, I was more going towards the Kali Ars, but I realized his reservedness, his one-on-one interest in relationship, his affinity for romantic and sad songs, all these made me think about Natramars to be much more clearer here. So that was what I gave him. I gave him Natramars 200. I used to give doses in powders then, so I gave him one dose, and I followed up regularly, weekly or to weekly. So this was what happened. He took Natramars 200 every week. What happened in the next 4 months was his itching gradually decreased and new eruptions developed on places which had been cleared before by ointments. So he was advised to stop any external applications, all his creams gradually, and I explained to him about exteriorization of suppressed symptoms. Now finally the hands, the eruptions cleared up completely, the hands became smoother, and interestingly the hip pains also decreased. So his need for the daily painkillers came down. And what was important was he became much more friendlier and quite open during the follow-ups, and he regularly followed for 4 months. And after that, I didn't see him. I spoke with him 1 year later, and that was when he remained well, and he did take the prescription as and when required, but not so frequently. So that was for me a very interesting synthetic prescription. Obviously, I would never ever have come to Natramars just based on the repertorization, but also most importantly was unless I would have gone for those affinity organs. Otherwise, I might have given him Kaliars. I can't say what would have happened. He would have done, something would have happened, but I just thought it was important that if you are looking on the mental aspect using a synthetic prescription, try and look for the organ of affinity for the physicals so that you balance the picture and confirm your prescription. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful. I would love to hear from you. What do you do in your own practice when you're giving synthetic prescriptions, whether you use them or you might not use them, and I would love to know the reasons also. Thank you. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.